Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Byword Show. I'm so glad you're here. Today's going to be a fun one. I've got my friend Sloane Wilson here with me. We're going to be talking about dating. She's the expert. You guys are going to love her. So let's just dive right into this. Sloane, would you introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, first off, I'm so excited to be here. I love your podcast and I've been loving the things you've been posting on social media. So I'm just really excited to come and hang with you for an hour and your listeners. So I'm Sloane Wilson. I am a dating coach and I'm also, I want to say a dating expert, but I guess I am 26, almost 27, and I have been dating for a minute. So I guess to some degree you could call me an expert, but I've been working in the realm of relationships for the last five-ish years now. And so I used to work with a nonprofit where I heavily oversaw our singles and dating portion of what we did. And then I was even able to help create a program called Date Well, which is a program for women. It's a 12 course, it's an extensive program on the topic of dating that leads you through 5 different core pillars that we believe is like the heart behind a healthy dating. And so we have incredible guests come on and join us to talk through amazing things and topics on dating. We have live calls and we have one-on-one times and all the fun things. I feel like I could talk about it forever because I love it and it's really exciting. So I love what I do and I'm just really glad to be here and hang with you.
I'm so glad you're here. And I love what you do with Date Well. It's so cool. And I wish I would have had those resources when I was in the dating world because oh my gosh. I mean, you and I have talked about how dating is it's crazy out there, especially when you're in your later 20s and there's just so much pressure in the church world, like all the things. So let's just unpack this because we have a lot to say, you guys. So buckle up. This is going to be a fun one. But as we're getting started, you mentioned the Date Well program and what you guys offer. Would you give us like a really brief condensed overview of like maybe like the pillars that you talk about in there, like what it all encompasses? Yeah.
Okay. So Date Well was like my baby, man. It took us like 2 years to build it because I felt very much the same way, Hannah. I felt like, especially in my early 20s, feeling like I don't know what the heck I'm doing when it comes to dating, especially dating in the church and especially dating as a Christian. I feel like there are so many caveats and nuances to dating that it gets really messy really easily. And a lot of people don't know what we're doing. And so I feel like I really wish I had resources or at least just had someone present with me in that process who understood where I was at. And so when it came to building Date Well, that was really my heart and intention behind it. I really wanted to hold space for women to process pain, like discouragement within dating, but then also process the successes and the, fun aspects and the like, oh my gosh, I just got out there, I went on a date, or like, oh my goodness, I'm like starting my online profile and it's really nerve-wracking and I'm nervous and it's fun. And all those things, I wanted to be able to hold space for women to share those. And so when it came to the pillars of Date Well, we spent a lot of time as a team, kind of diving into what does it look like to build a healthy relationship in general. And so when it came down to it, we found like these top 5 things were like, these are the essential, things we need to go after if we're going to build this thing. And so number 1 is identity. I think all of us can say that. I think in the church, the word identity is used pretty heavily, especially if you've grown up in religious environments. I think it's pretty easy to think that that's something that's going to be talked about because it's very essential,
Yeah.
And so the idea of identity, knowing who you are, but not just knowing who you are, being a friend to yourself, learning how to trust yourself, trusting your gut in dating is also super important. I feel like a lot of times we sacrifice that in dating, thinking that somehow maybe if I change here or shift here or conform here, maybe they'll like me more, maybe I'll find more men, maybe it'll be more what I'm wanting, all those things. And so in that identity portion, we talk about, who are you? Like not just who are you, but really like, who are you? What makes you come alive? What makes you passionate? What are your fears? Why are they your fears? All of those things. And then it kind of leads into the second portion, which is trust. And so a lot of dating is building trust, right? And so it's a lot of understanding how to trust yourself, and with trusting yourself comes, uncovering past pain that might be holding you back, whether that is like, childhood wounds that are like rearing their head in your dating life. Maybe it's past relationships or pain that cause you to want to take a step back in dating or makes you scared of dating. And really understanding how your upbringing affects the way that you date is a big portion of that trust pillar in dating, which is super important. And so when we go into trust, we have like a clinical psychologist come on and really talk through that idea of how your upbringing affects your dating life. And so that's like the biggest portion of that. So there's trust, then there's vision. It's just like what scripture says, right? Without vision, people perish. I think the same thing is true in dating. If you don't have a vision for your dating life, you're going to just kind of flounder around and hope that something sticks. But if you have a vision for dating, if you have a vision for what it could look like to have a healthy relationship or to have a healthy marriage eventually, to have a healthy family, all of those things are so important because it gives you something to have eyes towards. And it kind of weeds out all the non-essential situationships or relationships that just aren't actually helping you gain your vision, And then within that vision portion, we also talk about, because dating is also being single, like you're still figuring it out. Even if you're casually dating, that doesn't mean you're like immediately in a relationship, you're single. And so learning how to have vision for yourself outside of a relationship is huge in dating. And a lot of times we as women, we want to find our man, we want to get married, we want a husband, we want to have babies, all the things that we can take a step back and be like, wait, I don't actually know what I want to do with my life. I don't know what my calling is. I don't know any of these things. And it takes a lot of relearning and understanding what those things are. And so that's what that vision portion is. And then the last two portions is dating mindset and then dating strategy. So dating mindset is like, what are all the preconceived notions you've had about dating? Let's throw those out and let's replace those with healthier mindsets. What does it look like to have a healthy relationship? What does it look like to show up to dating wholehearted? So we really talk about that there and how to enter dating with a hopeful and plentiful mindset, abundant mindset. And then dating strategy is like, okay, how do we do the thing? Okay, how do we get out there? Like, how do we build a good dating profile? Like, how do I go on a first date? Like, how do I, I just went through heartbreak and it was really, really crappy and it sucked. How do I actually think I'm going to find someone else? Like, all of those things kind of are encompassed in that dating strategy portion. And so we have 12 sessions that kind of find their home in each one of those pillars. And so, yeah, man, we get into it and we have very real and vulnerable conversations. We have a group, I think it's about 400 women now, and we talk about the things, right? So we don't just skip over very taboo conversations. No, we go straight to them. We talk about all of the things. And that's one thing that I've loved about our Datewell community is that there's safety there. And I feel like if you're coming from church backgrounds or a religious background, it can be really scary to have some of the conversations that I know that you have questions about, like we all have questions about sex. We all have questions about purity culture. We all have questions about boundaries. We all have questions about these things that feel really taboo in the church. And so in Datewell, we've really built a safe space to have those conversations without shame or judgment attached. And so people can just be honest. And that's what I love. And that in my coaching too, and one-on-one coaching, that is what I love to do is I'm not going to sit down with you and tell you, okay, 1 + 2 = 3. And that's exactly how you're going to have a perfect dating life and you'll never have any issues. And let me tell you how to date because I know all the things. No, I don't run it like that. I really build a safe place to say, hey, I want you to process pain and I want to hold space for you to feel that and talk about the things that you're scared to talk about. And so all that to say, I just feel like I said so many words. I'm so sorry, but that's that.
No, I love it. I am obsessed with this because it's so special what you guys have built and it's so needed. I just think about when I was in high school, even just, like when dating was a new kind of thing to me, I felt so, number one, clueless and awkward. And then also, you know how it is. We've talked about this in the church. It just feels like dating is so high stakes. Like there's all this pressure to find the one and don't waste your time on casual dating. Like you have to find your husband. And it's, all of these things that really make it super serious and just, I don't know, it's really, it's just a lot of pressure on us that takes away from the joy of what dating then to marriage is meant to be, So I really love what you guys have created. And I would love to hear just like your story and then how you guys speak to that high pressure that we sometimes feel in church
Yeah.
world with dating, and maybe even this idea of finding the one and all of that. Like, what are your thoughts on all that?
Gosh, girl, we got how much time do you have? No, this is, I would say, probably one of the bigger questions that we get. And I mean, I work with women who are, Christians, and I work with women who aren't. And so I've seen a lot of both, right? So I see my faith is important to me. So I'm going to bring that into what I'm sharing, especially with someone who has a shared faith with me. But those who don't have the shared faith as I do, hearing their stories and letting them share with me what it's like for them is that there's a commonality between all sides, faith, non-faith, whatever, is this idea of just dating feeling so high stakes. And I would say, especially in the church, there is this greater sense of, I need to find my one. But the funny thing to me about that mentality, or the idea of finding the one being so prevalent in church environments, is that the idea of the one or soulmate actually came from Greek methodology. It wasn't even founded in scripture, which is funny to me that I'm just like, how did we adopt this? So essentially, I think how it goes, you could probably Google it, I'm sure, but I'll use my broken understanding of it to share, I guess. I think it was Zeus, that it was the idea that there was, originally people were created as, there was like a man and a woman, they were put together essentially, and they were like one human. And then Zeus was finding that these people were so powerful and they were doing so much and their egos were so big and they were going to like take over the kingdom or whatever. I don't know. And so Zeus was like, I'm going to split them in half and make them have this internal pressure to find their other half the rest of their life. So then they're preoccupied doing that they won't take over, I don't know, whatever, the kingdom. That's essentially what that means, is this idea that let me separate them. So then they are preoccupied with trying to complete themselves, that they aren't able to do everything that they were supposed to do, essentially is what it says.
Wow.
And so I think it's very funny to me when I hear this idea brought up in the church so often. It's because I'm like, well, hey, pause. Did you know where that actually came from? That's not, no one's talking about that in Romans 8 or something. It's not in scripture that it's like you have one human and that human is the only human you get. And even if we were to follow that idea, so let's say I'm speaking with someone who doesn't have the same faith as I am, something that they subscribe to, whatever. The idea of finding my one and there being only one person for me. Let's follow that train. Okay, so let's say my one person was Mike and I'm supposed to marry Mike. Well, Mike goes off and marries Hannah and now I'm alone and I don't have Mike. Does that mean that I now did something wrong and I have to marry someone who's not my person? And then if that's the case, that whole idea would crumble underneath the weight of everyone else making their own free will decisions. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up. And so the way I look at the idea of finding the one is like, no, you're not trying to find the one. You're trying to find your flavor. Like it's almost as if like it's two flavors. There's two flavors that you put together that are just like, oh my gosh, this is the best. This tastes the best together. And there's some flavors that you put together and things that's like, oh my gosh, that doesn't taste great. That's not super complimentary, right? You're trying to find your complementary person. You're trying to find the person that can come alongside you, support you, make you feel safe, vice versa, and you can build a life together. So the idea of the one is really limiting, and it's also very, very high stakes. And we don't need any more high stakes thinking when it comes to Christian dating, because we've already got enough. When I see the idea of the one too, and I talk with women about this, is they're like, I can almost always point when I know someone has the high stakes, the one mentality. So I'll ask them what it looks like to go like on a first date for them and what are common thoughts that go through their head when they're going on first dates. And the women who say like, well, I'm just trying to think, or do they have the same, like, do they want to have kids? Do they want to get married? And do they want to like do this? And like, and they're thinking like such forward thinking, futuristic, attaching thoughts based off a coffee date. I'm like, hey, babe, put a pause right here. You don't need to know if you guys are going to have 3 kids together yet. You just need to know if you guys have fun together. You need to know if they seem trustworthy right now. You keep it at level 1, because you're at level 1. You're on one date. And so kind of unearthing that mentality takes time, and there's no shame there, right? I had the same mentality for so long, it's real, it happens. But I think it's super important when we're trying to take steps back and really understand where our, thoughts are coming from, and understanding why we have high stakes thinking, to kind of just trace it back to like, what is it about dating that makes me feel extra high stakes? Is it that because I feel like if I don't find my one, I'm going to be alone forever? Does being alone forever scare me? Why does it scare me? Asking really good questions.
I just agree. Like, I think that it's so easy as a girl. I mean, I remember being in high school, college, more college age, but going on dates and being like, is he the person I'm going to marry? Like, just, and it just puts so much stress on the situation. It's like, I can't even focus on being myself and having fun because I'm just worried about whether we're going to break up or if we're going to get married. Like, it's just, it's way too much. It's way too much.
Totally. It's so true. And I feel like what you said is even such a good point. One thing that I always encourage my women to do is when they're going on a first date, because the common thought that comes in your head is like, oh my gosh, do they like me? Do they like me? Do they like me? Do they like what I was wearing? Do they think what I'm saying is funny? Do they think what I'm doing is cool? Like, all those things come to our heads. But I'm like, hey, let's pause. When you go into that date, let's not even go there yet. I don't even care if he likes you yet. Do you like him? Do you like hanging out with him? Do you like laughing with him? And so flipping the switch on like, oh, wait, I'm not having to prove myself here. I'm not having to prove that I'm good enough. I'm not having to make a man want me. I can just show up and have fun. That takes off the pressure too, of like, oh, this isn't going to be an identity marker here of if this guy likes me or not. And I feel like that's been such a journey, even in my own life, of being able to be like, oh, going on dates and just having fun and being so unafraid of being myself, because at the end of the day, if they can't handle me, and I don't mean that like I'm going to be crazy and just like jump off the rails, but the idea of if they can't handle me, if they can't handle my humor, if they can't handle, this or that, then like they're not my flavor, and that's okay. And I give them permission to find someone who is, and I don't need them to want me. I don't need this man to need me or want me in order for me to feel okay. And I feel like that's a really big thing when it comes to bringing down the high stakes. It's just even starting number one with that thought. Do they like me? Do I like them? And letting that be how you lead your first date. I just want to see if I like them. I'm going to come curious.
Yeah. And I just love that, because that's something where if I could go back and change anything about my dating life, I wish I would have just let myself have fun and be myself. I was, like you said, so focused on, I want them to like me. I want them to think I'm cool. I want them to, like all of these things. And then at the end of the day, it's like, if I'm trying to be all of these things and they do like me, then what's going to happen if they find out that's not really who I am? Like, I've just been pretending to be someone I'm not to get someone to like me, or acting a certain way when that's really just not who I am. And it's just, I don't know, adds a bunch of confusion to where if you're just yourself and it's more comfortable that way, like it gives you so much more peace knowing that it didn't work if you're just genuinely yourself, because you're like, okay, well, I was myself and it didn't fit. So that's okay. Like, I can move on to someone who does fit. And yeah, I just
totally
so much of that. That's definitely a huge step, being able to flip the switch on that. I'm curious, are there any other things that you've seen just get in the way for women to, whether it's like being able to get out there and date, or even enjoying dating? Like, what are some things you've seen hinder that?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, kind of what we were talking about in the beginning, right? And I feel like the culture that we're in the generation we're in right now is very like, very into the topic of loving yourself and loving yourself well, which is great. But some of it is very trendy topics. Does that make sense? Like, it feels very like, oh, very elusive, and like, just love yourself. And like, and sometimes they're loving yourself means like, go spend a bunch of money and like get your nails done and like all that stuff. Like, we should go for it. Do that if you want to. But I wouldn't say that's really loving yourself. I would say loving yourself looks like understanding and knowing yourself, understanding your triggers, understanding why your triggers are there, doing the hard work to heal from past pain, and then also doing the hard work of understanding what makes you. Like, what are you passionate about? What are those things that you really want to go after? What are those things that you're really afraid of because you feel like if you step into that realm, it's gonna be huge, and it's very vulnerable to like step into your calling and growing and all those things. And so I would say when it comes to dating, I'd say a big hang up, and this happens in my own life too. I'm almost 27. I'm dating, and I've been in relationships, and I've ended relationships, and all of the things. It's really that continual discovery of like, who am I? Like, I want to know what that is, because I do firmly believe if we don't know who we are in our singleness, when we're alone with ourselves, then every relationship that we enter will define us. It's hard for it not to. It's you, especially when you have a deep desire and a deep longing to have a partner. It's going to be so normal to shift, adjust, and form into, like you were saying even a second ago, kind of putting on a mask and forming yourself into what you feel like the other person needs. But that is not sustainable long term. At some point, the balloon's going to pop. At some point, you're going to get to a point inside of yourself where it's like, I can't fake it till I make it anymore. I'm not me. And so I would say that would be the biggest thing that I see getting in women's way, only because when we're constantly trying to be what we feel other people want us to be, then we aren't actually able to authentically show up to dating, and being real and having genuine conversations. And you can only go so deep at that point. If you have the mask, if you have, all the things that you feel like everyone else wants for you to have in order to be good, perfect, and worth loving. If you're wearing all of that, that gets really heavy, first off.
Oh yeah.
And then two, you're not able to actually have fun in dating. And I feel like dating should be fun. And I don't think that should be, having fun doesn't mean that there's not pain along the way. Having fun doesn't mean you're not facing hard things. Having fun doesn't mean rejection isn't going to come. Having fun is being able to show up to dating and saying, I know who I am. I love who I am. It's okay if they can't see that. It's okay if this didn't work out. It's okay if this relationship, this quote unquote failed relationship didn't work. Even the idea of a relationship being a failure, I just don't really, I know we'll talk about that in a bit too, but I don't believe that relationships, even if they end in breakups, are failures. We can talk about that more in a little bit, but I think that would be the biggest hang up I see in women, is not being able to know themselves fully. And when I say that, I don't mean you have to be perfectly healed before you date either, because that's also like the goal in your life. Your whole goal in your life isn't to just get married. There's so much more inside of you. And I think that's what I'm trying to say, is when we're so hyper focused on finding a man, getting married, having babies, and we're not actually able to invest in our dreams outside of that, then we get really lost and consumed with that idea that once we have it, we really don't feel like there's anything else for us, which is not true. There's so much more to who you are as a woman than to just be a wife and have babies. That's an amazing thing. And I want that one day. And I love that the women I work with want that. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful calling and a gift that we as women get to carry. But I also think there's other incredible things inside of you. You're a writer, you're a dreamer, you love fashion, you love this, you love all of these other things that make you you. And those things are so worth knowing. But you won't be able to share that with another person if you can't first find those things out yourself. So I say that would be the first big one. And then the other one would be what we just talked about, is the mentality of dating being so high stakes. That makes dating really scary. And I feel like for a lot of women who have that mentality too, it came from trauma, it came from pain. It's not, you're not just thinking dating is high stakes for no good reason. Like, you probably have reason to feel that way. And I think that kind of ties into what we're saying, just understanding what those reasons are and being able to better support yourself in the process, and then allowing yourself to take baby steps. And I'd say like the last thing that I've seen a lot of, just kind of funny, but getting in women's way, is this idea of a type and having a type, and my type is this and her type is that, and this is the only kind of man that I will ever go out with. And if I don't, if he's not 6'5", then don't even bother texting me back. Like, it's really, you know what I mean? Like, just this idea of a type. And for so long, I thought I had a type. Like, my type to a T was this. I just thought I wanted this really artsy, like, musician with like tattoos and like all the things. And I'm like, if he doesn't play guitar, and if he doesn't have tattoos, and if he's not, X, Y, and Z, then like, I'm not super interested. And it was so funny because then I ended up meeting the person I was in a relationship with last, and he was so far from my type that I almost wasn't even like into, like, I wasn't really I wasn't really interested. And then we went out, and I was like, wow, this guy's he makes me feel so safe. Like, wow, this guy's actually really great. Like, wow, he's very different, like muscular, like just, you know, not the idea of what I thought I ever wanted. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to date outside of my quote unquote type, because it broke that type barrier for me. Now that relationship might not have worked out, but I don't see that as a failure at all. I learned so much about what I really need in a relationship now. That's so much more than just tattoos and a guitar playing guy. Like I need other qualities that matter to me. And that's what dating should help you uncover. Dating is all on the process of discovering what you would need in the long term. And so I really talk about this heavily in Date Well, but it's the ideas of standards and preferences, essentially. Instead of having this long list of a type that he needs to be this and he's got to have this. And I literally went on a date with one guy, and he literally pulled out his list and was like, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And he's like, I want a girl with curly blonde hair. And I was like, I mean, I have curly blonde hair, but this is really awkward. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm not trying to be this woman for you, you know? And it's the same idea. Like, women do that too. And so instead of having this long list of like, this is what I have to have and my type has to be this way, kind of coming to the idea of standards and preferences. So standards being coming out with a list where you like, you know, one list can be like standards where it's like, these are your core values. These are your non-negotiable things. This is like, I need a man of integrity. I need a man who, you know, is determined, or I need a man that is emotionally available and emotionally aware, or someone who's really strong in their faith. Like these things that are core values to you, and what you are like, I'm not willing to negotiate on these core things. These aren't things like I need them to have brown hair, and I need them to be 8'9", and I need them to, you know, want to move to Nashville with me sometime because I just want to like do whatever. Like it's core things, like what makes up a human, you know, those standards. And then another side would be the preferences. So these are non-negotiables. I think it's fun to be aware of like, oh man, maybe I would be interested in this, but knowing that when you're looking at your quote unquote list, it's filled with more core things like integrity and strength and faith. Those kind of things are really important to you, rather than it just being a full list of like, I would, you know, it'd be kind of cool if he was a worship leader. Like, it'd be kind of cool if he was doing this. So I'm not saying that having preferences is bad. It's just when we prioritize our preferences over standards is when we get really limiting in our realm of meeting great men. And not being afraid to go out with men that are outside of your type. So I think those are the biggest things I see getting in the way of women.
Oh my gosh. All of that is so good. You touched on so many good things in there. And I love the idea that you talked about, just if a relationship doesn't last, it doesn't mean it's a failure, because you really can learn and grow so much from every single dating relationship. And man, I remember whenever I was dating Christopher, it was so funny because it was the only time I had gone into a relationship with no expectations, no standards. Like, it was so different for me, and it ended up being so good for me, because we ended up just hanging out in the beginning. It was just coming into the season where I wasn't necessarily looking to date, but we ended up just getting coffee as friends. And it was so comfortable because I had no expectations, that it was just fun. And it was the first time I let myself just enjoy it without thinking 5 years ahead and wondering if we would still be together, you know? And so it was really refreshing for me to get to that point where I was like, you know what? I can take everything that I've learned from past relationships about, you know, communication, things I wish I would have done differently, things that I really know now that I value and I won't budge on, you know, things like that I can take into future relationships. And it was just so good, because when I got to that point where Christopher and I were dating, I felt a lot more sturdy in who I was and knowing what I was looking for in a relationship. And we had started from a foundation of just really fun and casual and just getting to know each other, rather than just like talking about all that heavy stuff that we mentioned in the beginning. And it was so cool too, because kind of what you were talking about in the beginning too, just knowing who you are. It was so special the way that just God's timing through all of it, because right before Christopher and I started dating, I had decided that I was going to go do this mission school. And I knew that I was going to be out of state and then overseas for a while. And I had already committed to this. And then I met Christopher. So I had this moment where I was like, okay, do I keep my commitment and do what I feel like God is asking me to do, even though it'd be hard to do long distance and I am not looking forward to that? Or do I settle and be like, okay, well, I found this guy. I think I just want to see if this will work. And
Yeah.
I told Christopher, you know, I feel like this is what God is telling me to do. And he was so supportive. And that was one of the main ways
Oh,
that I knew that it was like he was the right person for me, is because he
I
was
love
so
that.
confident in me trusting God and being obedient to what God was leading me to do. And it's continued
Yeah.
to be that way in our relationship. He's just so supportive. But I remember for me in the beginning of our relationship, I mean, we've been dating. I mean, this was very, very beginning, maybe weeks. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's going to break up with me when he knows we're going to be long
Yeah.
distance for like 6 months and I'm going to be in another country. Like, what are we going to do? Everything's going to fall apart. And it was just so cool to have that moment where it was like, okay, I'm going to stand firm in this. I know this is what God is asking me to do. And you know what?
Oh, I love that.
If that's not going to work for him, then I'll just know it's not the right thing. And so that was a key moment in the beginning of our relationship where I was like, okay, this is really cool that I don't have to compromise my faith
Yeah.
or what God is asking me to do or this relationship. And he stood by me the whole time. And it was just a really cool thing. So
Wow.
that's something that I always tell people in dating. It's like, you should never have to compromise what God is telling you to
Yeah.
do for a guy,
Yeah.
because like you said, our calling, our purpose is so much more than who we
Hmm.
marry. And that plays a huge
Yeah.
part of it. You know, obviously, God, I was just talking to a friend of mine about this last night, actually, this idea that marriage is God's most clear picture to the world of his relationship with us. And so he takes it so
Yes.
seriously. And it's something too that he wants us to really understand love and enjoy, because again, that's his reflection to the world of the joy of his love and all the
Yeah.
goodness that comes from that. And so it's just so special when you wait for God's timing and you just let him do the work in
Yeah.
you along the way. Just like, okay, God, I'm all in with you. And then whenever you want to bring the right person to me, I'll be open, I'll be ready. But I'm curious because
Yeah.
this came up in our conversation last night, this idea of being content in singleness when you still have this desire.
Mm.
Like there's this kind of pull where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I desire to be married, but does that mean I'm discontent? And like, is the right person not going to come until I'm totally
Yeah.
fine with being single? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's so funny because that's definitely something that I've talked about even just with friends. And we all get so like just immediate like eyes roll whenever we hear the idea of like it comes when you least expect it, which I mean for a lot of people it does. And I think that, you know, I'm not against that, but I think it's funny to me where, you know, when people are giving their well-meaning advice, when you're just having a moment of vulnerability of like, hey, I like don't want to be single right now. Like, I'm kind of over it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like the first thing that happens is like, well, you know, when you least expect it, it's just gonna happen. And all of a sudden a man is gonna fall from the sky and it's gonna be your
Right.
person and you didn't even have to work for it. I I I don't know how I feel about that. I think when it comes to almost every other area in our lives, we put in effort, right? So think about like a job. You know, you put in a resume, you submit the resume, you go to interviews, you know do extra things in order to stand out in the crowd of you know other resumes. I think about schooling. Like if you have an end goal of like wanting to be, you know, a doctor, you're not just like sitting there, you know, at 19 being like, well, I'm going to be a doctor one day. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to school. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to wake up one day and I'll be a doctor. Like, no, you go through hard stuff. You go to school for years and you take tests and you do trials and all the things like, and I think the same is true when it comes to dating, right? Like when it comes to dating, this idea of just like it happens when you least expect it, you don't have to put any effort and it just will appear. I think for some people that's their story, and I don't disagree with that. But I think for a lot of women that hear that story is they end up thinking like, well, am I doing something wrong because I haven't
Mm.
been dating anyone in years and and nothing's been happening for me, you know? And then the questions I have for them are like, well, what are you doing? How are you investing in yourself? How are you
Mm.
investing in that dream of yours to want to be in a relationship? What are you doing about that? And then oftentimes I hear back, well, no, I'm waiting for God to send me someone. I'm waiting, you know, for divine appointments and things, which I'm like, okay, that's great. Also, have you tried online dating? Also, have you tried asking your friends to set you up? Also, have you tried going to you know, speed dating events or anything like that? And they're like, no, 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 no. I want it to happen when it's supposed to happen. And I'm like, that's great. But you need to know that there are so many different funnels to meeting new humans that if you are doing the same thing over and over again, that's like textbook definition of insanity, right? Like if you're doing the same thing and expecting a different result, that's insane. You're not going to get a different result. So I think the same is true for women who are really wanting to, that is a dream of theirs to get married, and they're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting that something just is going to magically fall from the sky and they didn't have to work for it. I'm just like, well, babe, there's a lot of different options. We can figure this out together, kind of thing. And the reason I say that is there's so many different funnels of meeting humans that I think women, they think of online dating as like, oh, that's me taking God's heart out of it or God's plan out of it. And I'm like, no, the same thing is true. If you were to walk into a grocery store and see an attractive man or whatever, or they think online dating is like scary or bad, or like, you don't know, there could be bad people on there. I'm like, the same is true. You walk into a grocery store, you see an attractive man. You don't know his story. You don't know his name. You don't know how old he is. You don't know his background. You don't know his baggage. Like if you were to go up to him at a grocery store, what makes that any more different than being online, where it's a group of people who have all committed to say, hey, I'm at least somewhat interested in a relationship. There's going to be people who are there for hookups. I'm sure there's going to be people there who are there for unhealthy motivations and reasons. The same is true in any area of life. Like it's not just going to pop out of nowhere, And I think that when it comes to fighting for your dating life and unto wanting a marriage eventually someday, putting in effort shouldn't be labeled as desperate or a bad thing. And I feel like we sometimes think it is, like, oh, if I get on online dating, that means I'm desperate. Or, oh, if I ask my friends to set me up on blind dates, that means I'm desperate. No, that just means that you're proactive and you're just trying to get out there, and it's baby steps, and that's okay. And if people think you're desperate for that, then those aren't the kind of people that you want in your life in the first place. Because I can guarantee that if there's people who love you and support you in your life, that are your true friends, their voice is the ones that matter the most to you. And they're not going to say that you're desperate. If you're like, hey, I'm really interested in getting back out there and dating again. I would like to get married one day. Could you think about maybe setting me up with someone? Or, if you hear of anyone that you feel like would be a good fit for me, just let me know, And so the side that we were just talking about a second ago of just, having hope for dating and marriage and wanting that. But then also for the women who are maybe struggling in their singleness right now and like really kind of struggling with the idea of marriage and thinking that their only end goal is marriage. I would say like one of the biggest temptations as a single is putting your life on hold until you find your husband. But life doesn't start when you get married, right? You have the capacity to go after your God-given dreams right now. And using this time is important. Like, because if you want to get married, have kids one day, I'm sure you could speak to this, Han. Like, time is going to look different, and that's not a bad thing. Your energy is allocated in another aspect of your dreams and calling. But when you're single, you can also use the time that will be used eventually on family and kids right now. And so I feel like being able to uncover those dreams, the questions I would ask are like, and on three main points would be like gifts and passions. What are you good at? What are you passionate about? What do you love to do? What do others say that you're good at? Another thing that you can dig deeper into finding your passions and goals outside of just being married would be like different pain points in your life. Like, what were some pain points that you experienced? Like, how did you heal from those things? How did you overcome from those things? Those things could be a roadmap to healing for other people. So just uncovering that. And then another point would be God moments. So what were some significant God moments that you had in your life, and why were they significant to you? And is there a silver thread that's kind of running through all of them, or prophetic words that you've gotten or received, or words that people have spoken over you? Like, is there a common thread? So kind of navigating all of those kind of questions and boiling down to like, what is it that I'm really passionate about, and what is a calling in my life outside of just getting married? Yeah. Did that answer your question? I feel like I went.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, that's so good. I love it because the questions that come to mind are things that you've touched on and kind of communicated so well. Is just like, man, I love that idea of, if you want to get married, what are you doing to put yourself out there? Because that is daunting. I feel like, at least for me, I got married fairly young, but I think about friendships as an adult and how awkward that can be. And it's just a different dynamic because you feel like, I don't know, at least for me growing up in the church, maybe it's just like a normal human being thing, but you get to the certain age and you're just kind of expected to have it figured out. And there's so much permission to not know. Like there's so much grace and space when you're single to figure out yourself and just really lean into God and what he's calling you to do. And it's so special then when you have really embraced that part of like who you are and your identity, like you've already touched on, that when you join with another person, it's just so cool. Like when you have another person who's also done the work for themselves to get ready for a good, healthy relationship. It's just, that's so cool. And there's nothing like it. So yeah, I love everything you just said. I echo all of that, especially from my experience with dating, good and bad relationships.
Right.
Oh man.
I mean, I think that even speaks into like, you know, the idea of like bad relationships, you know, like we were talking about breakups earlier, and I just feel like this is such an important topic because I feel like this is something that's been really highlighted lately that I, just in my own life. I mean, in my own life, I've just recently went through a breakup like 6 months ago. And we were engaged at one point. It was a serious relationship. It wasn't like a little like 2-month thing, you know, but I'm really proud of the way that we made the decision to end our relationship. We did it. It was really beautiful. It didn't mean that it wasn't painful. It didn't hurt like hell. Yes, it did. It sucked. Like that was someone that you were connected with and you built with and you had plans and dreams with. So I'm thinking of all the women who may be listening who are currently going through a breakup, just knowing that you're not alone in that pain because it's very real. There were studies done on on brains of women who've gone through breakups. And it was saying that, how is it? It was like, there's the same part of your brain that lights up during physical pain. Like if you broke your leg or something, lights up when you have a broken bond like that, like a broken relationship. So to all the women who may be listening who are going through a breakup and you're like, I am stuck, like I am in pain. It's been X amount of weeks or X amount of months or years or whatever, but I am still hurting. You're not crazy. You are not crazy. Your body physically goes through a period of just, you know, pain and withdrawal from something that was so normal for you. And it's almost like you're breaking a habit, right? Like if you're so used to talking and seeing someone every day and having that person to rely on, and then it's not there anymore, it is this feeling of like, oh my gosh, what do I do with my time now? Like I kind of feel, you know, open, and there's all this more space to think and ruminate and assume what could have I done differently? What could have they done differently? If it was a painful breakup, like if they cheated or something, like what was wrong with me that they chose that? All those thoughts kind of start to invade on that lack of, or that your newfound time and, you know, space. But yeah, one thing that I really learned about breakups, because when he and I went through our breakup, it sucked. It wasn't fun. But it was, it was so beautiful in the way that we did it. Like we had a really healthy conversation about how much we cared for one another, but knew that we weren't able to give each other what we needed. And I feel like after that breakup with him, I feel like I had this new understanding of relationships that end don't mean that they were failures. I look at any relationship as, you know, I mean, aside from like abusive relationships, it's a whole different story, but if we're just talking about the, you know, the everyday broken relationship or breakup. I mean, it was a success in the sense that you learned and you grew and you found new things that you needed and you found things that you didn't need anymore. And you were able to shed things that weren't actually serving you anymore. And you were able to take on things that actually were, and you were able to hear God's heart in the midst of it. And so there's so many different things in a breakup that can actually uncover more of who you are as a woman. And it doesn't mean that you're broken if you are, you know, walking through pain from a breakup. And what I've learned so much about breakups, even, you know, recently walking through my own, is like the pain that you face in a breakup is never just about your ex. Like it's never just about losing your current ex. It is recycled pain. It is, you know, childhood pain. It's past experiences. It's almost this idea of a confirmation bias where it's like you're looking for evidence to prove to you that this is why I'm not worth it. Like if as a kid you dealt with so much pain and maybe your parents weren't present to you, or maybe, you know, X, Y, and Z happened. And you get into a breakup and, you know, similar threads are kind of coming up again. It's like, it feels so much bigger because it wasn't just, you know, the relationship of 2 months that got broken up. It was the 5-year-old girl who didn't have a dad supporting her. It was the, you know, the relationship years ago that really broke you apart that you weren't able to fully heal from. It's the big emotion, or all the big emotions leading up to the one. And it almost has, I mean, it has things to do with your ex, I'm sure, but it almost always has way more to do with recycled pain. And being able to uncover that is so freeing and empowering to you, because you get to understand that this breakup sucked. It wasn't fun, but this is not my end all be all. Like, if the pain that I'm feeling right now is something I can walk through and heal from and get stronger from, like, this is, a breakup is a bridge to your final destination. If your goal is to get married one day, you tried it, it didn't work. Great. Like, now you know what you really need moving forward. And not great in the sense that, okay, great, that, didn't hurt or wasn't, painful. No, but it was great in the sense that you learned so much about what you needed in a long-term partner. And if that took going through hard things to find that, that was worth it. And you did not waste time. I think that's the biggest thing I want to speak over women who are maybe currently going through a breakup, is the years that you spent with that person, the months, the weeks, the time you invested, the heart you invested was not a waste of time. And I know in my own life, that was something I had to navigate of like, oh my gosh, I just waste 3-4 years of my life on a relationship. And I just got alone with God and was like, no, this was not wasted time because I learned XYZ. This is not a waste of time because I was able to grow in XYZ. It wasn't a waste of time because I met all these new connections through this person. I made all of these memories and I get to hold on to these. These get to be mine forever. And, like, we didn't get married, but I, from 23 to 25, I had incredible memories with him and I'm grateful to have those, and those get to be mine forever, even if we get married to other people. And that's a good thing. Those aren't bad things. And so I think the first thing I would say for someone who's going through a breakup would be like, asking yourself, what are you ruminating on? What story are you telling yourself about this breakup? Like, because that's going to point to the recycled pain. Like, our brains are wired to find confirmation bias of like all the evidence to prove that I'm somehow not good enough to support the lies that we're believing about ourselves or support the negative story that we're trying to tell ourselves. So if you're able to uncover those, then you are so much more equipped to do this thing well and heal from this breakup and move on and find the strength to meet someone new one day with an even more security inside of yourself,
Yeah, definitely. Wow. That's so good. And I'm so glad that's something you talk about, because I feel like the breakup is such it's just hard. And it's sometimes even taboo to talk about, like, even the idea of breaking up well, like the idea that breaking up can be so good and healthy and beautiful. Like, even though it hurts so bad, like, you really can take away so much good from that will lead you into better things in the future. And so thank you for sharing that. I just appreciate you sharing from where you are currently coming from in your journey. And it's just been so cool to see. So before we close,
I'm so glad.
I would love to hear, do you have any like top dating tips for our single ladies?
So many dating tips. There's so many things I was like wanting to talk about today, but I'm like, if we talk about this will be a 5-hour podcast. I would say number one, as far as like resources even go, one thing that is so key and has like changed the way that I have viewed dating is understanding my attachment style. And attachment theory is a scientific based study that was done years ago by a man named Dr. Bowlby and one of his students. And the study itself is incredible. I'm like a psychology junkie, so just learning about this stuff is so fascinating to me. But when I stumbled on this, it was so pivotal to how I changed my dating journey. So I feel like a lot of women will be like, I'm stuck. I'm dating the same man all over again. I'm always attracted to the bad boy. I'm always attracted to the emotionally unavailable man. Like, and the attachment theory really points to why you do that. And it's not some like, out there, like, a lot of people have opinion on the Enneagram or whatever. And it's not a personality typing system. It is a literal scientific based study that they did. If I go into it, I'm going to keep talking about it. So I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to tell you the resource to get. You're going to read the book. The book Attached is really good. It's by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. I will say about this book, it's not a faith-based book. So as long as you're fine with that, like for people who are listening, it talks more in depth about the study that was done and then the understanding of the different styles. Essentially what attachment style is it's proving the point of like how your upbringing affects the way that you see, perceive, and receive love. in dating relationships. And it is insane and it's beautiful and it's awesome. And so we also, in the organization that I worked with, More Revolution, we did a podcast not too long ago, I think like a year ago, on the topic of attachment styles with a clinical psychologist. So if you want to check that out too, maybe I'll send you the link when you put it in the show notes. But that talks about it too. But the book Attached is really good if you're like wanting to like dive deep into it. I would also say the book, if you're in a more serious relationship and you're trying to figure out like, is this a dude I want to marry? A really good unearthing book is Sacred Search by Gary Thomas. That book will bring up a lot of vital questions that need to be talked about prior to marriage or prior to the engagement conversation. I also would say the Heart of Dating podcast. They talk about so many different types of things in the realm of dating and Christian dating. That's like awesome. So they talk about all the taboo things over there as well. And I really love them, especially if you're a podcast listener like me. And then I would say Boundaries in Dating by Henry Cloud is also a really good book. But I would probably end all of my resources with saying, if you are also like me in the sense that you are an external processor, and in order for you to understand how you feel about something, you need to process it out and just talk it through. Having a coach, life coach, counseling is so vital when it comes to dating. A lot of people wouldn't think so. You think like, oh, I can just talk with my friends, or I can just share with my family, or I could talk in my small groups. No, it's so different when you come into a space with someone who is completely unbiased, who's not going to judge you, and is giving you free realm to feel what you need to feel. I knew for a long time with me, I would share with my family, or I'd share with my mom, or I'd share with my best friend about, the struggles I was going through or the relationships I was in. And then it was like, it would put a bad taste in all of my friends' mouths of like the person I was seeing. But really, I just needed to process it out. I don't even know if I actually felt what I felt in that moment. But then that carried on with them. And they were like, well, do you remember that one time? And I'm like, well, no, like we actually walked through that. It was fine. I was really mad and I was bitter in the moment. And then, and so having someone to externally be a backboard for you in dating is so important. And so if that's something that you're interested in, dating coaching, I think it's incredible because I've been doing it and I love it. And then Datewell, obviously Datewell is so fun. We'd love to have you come join us at Datewell. If you're really like, no, I want to jumpstart that. Like if you, we were just talking about heartbreak. If you just went through a heartbreak, I would so encourage you to join us at Datewell, because it really is going to be a jumpstart into you uncovering who you are again, post breakup, finding your equilibrium, finding your new normal, and then also getting ready to be back out there and dating and how to do that. And so, those would be all of my recommendations.
Thank you so much. This has just been so cool to talk about. I wish this was talked about more. I wish I had talked about it more when I was dating. So I'm just so grateful to you, your story, and what you do with Datewell. So thank you so much for being here. Can you please tell everybody where they can connect with you and get more of this goodness?
I'd love that. Yes. So I am on social media. It's just Sloane_Wilson. I'm pretty sure. I don't post much on my Instagram. My Instagram is more of like, I'm sure you probably relate to this too, but it's like, it's my life. I just like to have my life there. So I don't post a lot of my things that I do there, but I will say that, if you are interested in doing dating coaching with me, all the ladies who are listening on this call right now, you guys can get $10 off your first session with me. I'll give you the code for that, Hannah, and we can put that in the show notes. And then if you are like, oh my gosh, Datewell does sound interesting and I want to follow Sloane more there, or I want to learn more about what they're talking about at Datewell, I'd love to give you guys a discount there. I'll give you $50 off, and we'll give you the code. You can just use code Sloane, and then you can follow the link that Hannah will put in the show notes. You'll get $50 off of Datewell. So those are my other little tidbits if you want to come join the party with where I'm at.
I love it. Thank you so much. That's so kind of you to offer. So you guys definitely need to go connect with Sloane, go connect with Datewell. They've just got so many more resources just like this. We truly could have a 5-hour show just talking about this. So you guys let me know if we need to have Sloane back for part 2, we will do it. But seriously, thank you so much for taking the time. Fun. I really appreciate you sharing, and this has just been so fun.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it's been so fun. I'm so glad I got to jump on this space with you, Hannah. You're killing it, girl.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and I'm so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. I can't wait to talk again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on Instagram, and remember, I am cheering you on.